Hello, this voice will guide you on this video to follow the topic of the aesthetic of violence in video games. Maybe I have some accent, hope it would not let you to misunderstanding. Video game is quite popular in teenager groups, also is known as electronic games, refers to all interactive games running on the platform of electronic devices. The appearance of video games at the end of the 20th century has changed the way people play and the definition of the word game. Let's going to see the history of video games first. Video game belongs to a cultural activity born with the development of science and technology. How could we identify video game belongs to arts or not? In Aaron Smuts' article, Are Video Games Art? He mentions that video games combine elements from narrative, fiction, film, music and sports. They are arguably an art or sister art of the moving image, specifically, a form of digital animation. The code is like musical notation that is performed by the computer. And the games are played like sports. The essence of video game art is virtual reality. If fiction is a kind of lie, the novelist will divorce from the real world and imagine freely when he constructs the plot in the novel. In this sense, fiction, drama, movies and even video games are all illusions and lies, but in another sense, they represent a certain degree of truth. In Tavenor's article, The Art of Video Games, he put forward relevant opinions. Of course, the artistry of video games is not recognized at the beginning.
If at that time you would have asked me, can video games be art? I would have said, I'm 13, what do I know? My opinion on it now is that those games were games. The objectives were clear, the rules relatively simple, like soccer or basketball or any other sport. The primary purpose of the experience was to win. In the period since, games have become vastly more complicated, and the question of whether or not that form is an art, a fine art, has become the topic of serious philosophical debate. Legally, of course, that decision was decided on much more specific terms. It started in the early 80s when a series of American court decisions found that video games could not be covered under art's free speech protections because they were no more expressive than pinball or chess. Those precedents determined much of what followed. In 2002, federal judge Stephen Limbaugh ruled against.
On the other hand, the video game is also plagued by violent factors. Many video games are full of violent aesthetic elements to attract players. And parents often worry that these factors will brainwash young people and affect their growth. Violent aesthetics originated in the United States. It is a formal exploration of film art. It ritualizes violent action scenes. Its characteristics are: creators often use postmodern techniques to dispel the gun battles and fighting scenes in the film into meaningless games and jokes or symbolize them as visual and auditory aesthetic elements closely related to the content of the film. This kind of film pays more attention to the sense of form of gun battles, martial arts movements and scenes, and promotes the form beauty to the dazzling level, but ignores or weakens the social functions and moral functions. Violent aesthetics also plays such a role in video games. In terms of game entertainment, there are still many people who question the violent aesthetics. Even many people have always insisted on the violent aesthetics in Western movies and games. The theme is often only one: hero saves the world, the winner is king. In the game process, violence satisfies people's venting bath, and aesthetics pulls people back to morality. The violent aesthetics of the game is not to promote violence through the cloak of aesthetics but to violent in safe, but this measure does require certain policy guidelines to grasp.